This is just a strange matchup in our main event, but it should deliver because we have Frankie Edgar taking on Pedro Munhoz. And Matt, it should be a good one. And in terms of height and reach stats, you might think, well, Frankie Edgar is an all-timer at lightweight. He's going to be a much bigger fighter, but it's not so. I mean, in terms of height and reach, very similar. And Frankie Edgar at lightweight, you can't discount anything he did. I mean, the fights with Gray Maynard, insane. He has to be considered up there as one of the best lightweights of all time. Up there with the Habibs, the Benson Hendersons, and so on and so forth. And no, I'm not saying that if they were in their primes that Frankie Edgar would beat Habib Nurmagomedov. But as it stands, Frankie Edgar, obviously a Hall of Famer, a first ballot type of guy. He's been doing the damn thing for the longest time, and he's taken on a really tough test in Pedro Munhoz. And you could kind of liken Frankie Edgar's eventual move down to 35, similar to that of Jose Aldo. Now, I know Jose Aldo somehow, oddly enough, lost to Volkanovski. Then he lost to Marlon Moraes. Then he got a title shot against Petr Yan. I don't see Frankie Edgar losing 2 in a row to Max Holloway and then getting finished in his last fight against a Korean Zombie. If he beats Pedro Munhoz, he gets a title shot. But Matt, stranger things have happened in 2020.
Oh, for sure. And this matchup is a really fun one, especially for Edgar's first in the division, because Pedro Munhoz, what does he struggle with? Speed. He has really big power. He's amazing on the ground. People know how good he is jiu-jitsu. But he's not the fastest guy, and he can kind of get around that, though, because he hits so hard. The Cody Garbrandt fight is a very good example. Craig and I were in a drive-thru of McDonald's. I'll never forget. I was in the passenger seat. We were watching the fight on his phone, but the car was parked. I'm not incriminating us. Anyways, we were watching it, and Pedro Munhoz knocked out Cody Garbrandt, and I yelled a lot, and maybe some people at McDonald's got startled. But anyways, Pedro Munhoz, if Frankie Edgar goes for a lot of takedowns, Munhoz is enough of a threat on the ground that it might make Frankie Edgar fight like he fought Brian Ortega, because Brian Ortega kind of brought a similar skill set, but maybe a little bit more developed than Munhoz, because Ortega, with Edgar, you can't take Ortega down. So it's going to be a primary boxing fight, and then Ortega was able to add in that elbow. With Munhoz, I don't see Frankie Edgar going for many takedowns against Pedro Munhoz, because just that threat of the guillotine, something that Munhoz is very much famous for. That's his best submission by far.
Especially when you have a very good pure wrestler in Frankie Edgar. And again, we can talk about his camp as much as you want. I mean, he's got a great guy there in Zabit Magomedsharipov to switch it up standing. But a main training partner being Lance Palmer, you know exactly, tried and true formula. You look at the stats. I mean, this is the UFC's Iron Man. They build him as that. He spent so much time in the cage. Typically, if you're in a Frankie Edgar fight, you're going over that 15 minutes. I mean, his career average is 16.46. He's been in a number of title fights, a number of main events, not just at 55, but he kept trying to get it at 45. It never really happened, but man, did he ever have some big fights.
Oh, yeah, and Frankie Edgar, well, until two of his last 3 losses, I guess, he had never been finished until that Ortega fight. And that was something that he really held on to, because yes, Frank Edgar, he might not win every fight, but he'd always at least make it to the final bell. And then we kind of saw, I don't want to say he's getting old, because skill set wise, Frank Edgar is still very much, you can really apply his skill set to modern MMA. It's not like he's aged himself out like a BJ Penn, for instance. It's just we don't really know where his durability's at. And I'm not doubting, yes, Brian Ortega probably hits harder than every guy at 135. And yes, the Korean Zombie definitely hits harder than every guy at bantamweight. But when a guy gets later on in his career, and when he's taking a lot of damage, because Frank Edgar is being one of those fight of the night, not really risk for fight of the night, but he's always in the discussion for a guy who could be in a fight of the night because he takes a lot of damage. He's going to lose that durability at some point, and Pedro Munhoz is really going to be able to test him, because if he does land one of those big hooks, and if he's at any point, he's able to get on top of Frankie Edgar. Yes, Frankie Edgar is a phenomenal grappler, so Munhoz might not be able to submit him, but that would definitely be the worst position for either guy, is if Munhoz is somehow able to get on top of Frankie Edgar.
Now, we've seen it from older fighters, either changing weight classes or still getting really big fights. We saw it here recently. Chris Weidman went up to 205, lost to Dominic Reyes, came back to 85, countered him out. Both counted him out, but a lot of people counted him out, and put on a good performance against Omari Akhmedov. That doesn't stand here as much, but still a former champ, an all-American type of guy, a former wrestler, just like Frankie Edgar, and Weidman found success just going back to the well. Now, do I think in a 5-round fight it probably favors Munhoz? It could,
no,
only due to the fact that he has a submission and the finishing abilities. But I already prefaced it by saying Frankie Edgar's fights normally go over the 15 minutes. He's continued to have big fights, and we look at it. Korean Zombie, you're training for a 5-round fight. You had a title fight against Max Holloway before that. Cub Swanson, we're talking about 2 years ago. Frankie Edgar's been in so many 5-round fights that what I said doesn't matter. It really doesn't. you don't have to totally put your hat and really worry about the finishing abilities of Pedro Munhoz in terms of being one of those longer fights. As this guy's career goes on at 38 years old, almost 39, it's just a surprise, though, that moving down in weight, you're continuing to get these fights.
I gotta be honest, I don't think this weight cut's gonna go all that well for Frankie Edgar, and I only say this because Ali Abdelaziz, for what it's worth, had tweeted out a picture of Frankie Edgar doing his weight cut, and he's like, my boy's only 10 pounds away, he's right there. Frankie Edgar did not look great physically, and it did remind me a lot of Jose Aldo. The first time they were starting to see those pictures from the Aldo camp come out of him cutting down to 135.
TJ Dillashaw?
Yeah, those aren't positive pictures. Frankie Edgar looked very drawn out already. Now, of course, this was when this fight was originally supposed to be scheduled a few weeks ago, but still, none of those promising signs. I don't know how that weight cut's gonna go for him, because you would think if he was going to go to bantamweight, he would have done this a while ago. Now, I understand he was competitive at 145 for a very long time, but if you're going to do this, I don't understand why you'd wait till you're almost 39 years of age to do it.
And I mean, to back that up, the plan was to move to bantamweight before the Korean Zombie fight, but still, you're not so much on the back nine, but you're getting close. You're on the cart at the path. You're going to the clubhouse. You're going to get yourself a nice soda or a pop, whatever it is, and some chicken fingers, but you're getting ready to tee off on the 10th hole.
If you think Frank Edgar's only on the 10th hole, you haven't been paying attention. He is on the 17th hole chipping onto the green, because Frank Edgar, he's been around and he's done that for so long, and it's really hard for me to sit here and tell you that a 38-year-old former champ is going to somehow be able to move down his second weight class after, removed from the one that he won the title, and then he's going to go on this crazy long run. I can't predict that Munhoz is going to knock out Edgar. I can't predict he's going to submit him. I don't even know all that confidently that he's going to be able to beat him. But Frank Edgar, I don't think this is the weight class for him. I do think 45 is kind of where he should be at. Now, I understand for him it's kind of a bad situation. You've lost to pretty much all the top guys there at this point. I know Volkanovski's a new matchup, but still not a lot of people are looking for that. So this is really the only place for Frankie Edgar at this phase in his career. I just don't think a fight night against Pedro Munhoz is really going to be able to set him off in that championship direction that he thinks it might be able to.
Is it kind of like Gastelum and Bisping? Would you kind of consider it like that?
No, because Frankie Edgar didn't fight 3 weeks ago, and that's an important wrinkle of that fight. But Pedro Munhoz isn't. He's a knockout threat, but not really. He's only a knockout threat if you make a mistake. For instance, like the Garbrandt fight's a great example. Munhoz has big power, but he had to kind of draw Cody into that firefight for him to land one of those big shots. If Frank Edgar could keep Munhoz honest, go for those fake takedowns back into the striking, really do what Aljamain Sterling and what John Dodson was able to do to him. If you can mix it up enough on Pedro Munhoz, he will start to fade as the fight goes on. Because again, if you're a guy who carries around that much power, power and cardio aren't two things that a lot of guys have just because they're kind of counterintuitive. So Pedro Munhoz, he hits really hard. If it goes to the ground, he's a huge submission threat. But as the fight goes on, after the second round, I would say Frankie Edgar is probably my favorite to at least win round 3, 4, and 5 if it makes it that far. So I'm going to say Pedro Munhoz is going to win this by stoppage. I'm not in love with that pick, but I think he might be able to get it done, especially with the weight cut of Frankie Edgar. But if this fight does go all 5 rounds, I wouldn't be surprised at all if Edgar's able to get a decision.
You've got a guy in Frankie Edgar, again, like you had mentioned. You're moving down. You went from lightweight to featherweight. That was quite a while ago when he made that transition. It was successful. I mean, realistically, he didn't win the title, but he fought for it multiple times. And then if you look at it in this fight, you're moving to 35. You're an older guy. You're probably going to go to your bread and butter, your strength of wrestling. And he's not the type of guy that's going to go for head and arm throws. He's not the type of guy that's going for that Greco, Roman wrestling, or judo, or any of those takedowns. You're going to go to the well of the single legs, the double legs, the things that guys like grapplers and Pedro Munhoz are really adept at syncing up a choke. Like you had mentioned, a guillotine. It works wonders for him, and that power advantage as well. It's one of those ones that you have to worry about. I'm in agreement with you. In terms of the odds, we might as well mention them because right now, about a week out from the fight, Pedro Munhoz is a minus 229 favorite. A little bit of money coming in on Edgar at a plus 185. And then if you look at it over on Tapology, limited sample size out of 300 votes, 66 going with Munhoz, 69% predicting a knockout win for Munhoz. I'm going with Munhoz. Early rounds, Matt's going with Munhoz.
I'm not going with 70% knockout rate Pedro Munhoz, though. He's not Francis Ngannou. Like, he's probably going to be able to get it done. I can see him winning by TKO, but that's a staggering number. At least I see people who predict he's going to win in that fashion. I think he can win. He's kind of got the trifecta. Could he submit Frank Edgar? Yes, but Frank Edgar's a phenomenal grappler, so he's not going to. Could he knock him out? Definitely, and especially the weight cut. I think that's a bit of an issue. He can win by decision, too. I think the leg kicks of Pedro Munhoz are very underrated. Really, the whole kicking game of Pedro Munhoz. So, yeah, really exciting fight. Really great bantamweight main event.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to it. We've had a lot of great bantamweight fights. Chito Vera getting a big win over Sean O'Malley. Merab Dvalishvili getting a big win over John Dodson, a name that you had mentioned. And so on and so forth. Piotr Yan, your champ. Is this the Piotr Yan era? Who knows? But I'm really looking forward to this fight. Both going with Pedro Munhoz. Make sure you go back through the playlist. I'm sure fights might change in and around this week. So make sure you keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks, Matt. And as we always say, let's get into it.